Hey guys, it's Kathy, Coach Kathy here. Time for another cat chat. Grab your water, grab your tea, grab your coffee. We've got a little bit of macros to talk about today. Today's going to be the Macros 101 video that I promised you that I would do. Uh, as you notice, I'm still a little under the weather. I didn't bother to do my hair and makeup for you. I know you don't care. I actually don't feel that bad, but just still fighting whatever this is. So no big deal. We'll press on because we've got some stuff to talk about. So macros 101 is what we're going to be discussing today. And this applies to you whether you do intermittent fasting or calorie restriction, or if you do count macros as a means of weight loss. But so many times in the diet and fitness industry, we use terms and we assume everybody knows what we're talking about when we say certain words. And macros is one of those. So I just wanted to take time today to just break that down a little bit for you. If you want to get a pencil and a piece of paper, you can too, or just, come back to this video later. That's the great thing about the videos is that you can always research. But anyways, macros is just an abbreviation for macronutrients. And it's not to be confused with micronutrients, which would be your vitamins and minerals. But macronutrients there's four, and they are what all food is a combination of. So all food is either a fat, a protein, a carbohydrate, or alcohol. Those are the four sources of energy, and all food is composed of a combination of, or just one of all of those. So each one of them holds a different job as far as what happens to it once it's digested, and each one holds a different calorie total. So first off, we'll go with fat. That has 9 calories per gram. So when you see the nutrition label that's on the back of all food now, that wasn't really a thing in the 80s and even in the 90s, but since sometime in the end of the 90s, it got legislated that all food must have the nutrition information and the ingredients on it. So when you see that fat, 15 grams, and sometimes it'll even break down what kind of fat it is, that's just showing you how many of that macronutrient is present in the food. So fat has 9 calories per gram. It's the most calorie dense. It gives you the most bang for your buck as far as calories. Protein has 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. And alcohol has 7 calories per gram. So I'm just going to go into a little bit of what each macro does for us, but I'm not really doing a deep dive. This really is just a 101. This is just the basics. So alcohol, first of all, has no nutritional value at all. It is just 7 calories per gram, and that's it. And if you consume alcohol, your body will use that as a fuel source first, above and beyond anything else. So anything you consume after that is going to be stored for later. And if it's much later, then it's going to be stored as fat. So again, alcohol is the least significant and has 0 nutritional values. And as such, it should be consumed with great caution and moderation. So let's go to the big guy first, the 9 grams of calories per gram, which is fat. So there are a few different kinds of fat. There's saturated fat and unsaturated fat and trans fat. Trans fat you've probably heard a lot about lately. It's actually banned in some countries. And to be honest, it probably should be banned here too. So trans fat is the bad fat. That's the really, really bad fat. That's the fat that naturally is liquid at room temperature, but it's been chemically messed with, so it turns into a fluffy solid at room temperature. So this is your Crisco and your shortening and your margarine, and it's bad. It jacks up your inflammation. It can cause arterial wall damage. It can lead to cardiovascular disease, and it absolutely leads to obesity. And they have put this in everything in the last 20 years. It's in everything from crackers to pie crust to little snack cakes, Oreo fillings, like anything that has that kind of waxy mouthfeel to it, it probably had trans fats in it. And it replaced lard. Lard used to be what people would use, and then it kind of got a bad rap, unfortunately, and we switched to this man-made fat that was way cheaper. And it's just garbage, avoided at all costs. So that leads us to saturated fat and unsaturated fat. Again, the more, when we know better, we do better. And we used to really demonize saturated fat because of some junk science that happened in the 50s by a doctor named Ansel Keys. But we're slowly learning and we're realizing that not all saturated fat is bad, and not all unsaturated fat is good too. So your saturated fat is going to come from your dairy, and it's going to come from animal sources mainly. And there is some saturated fat in non-animal sources as well, like coconut oil. And some unsaturated fats, though they do come from vegetables, it doesn't mean that they're any better. A lot of vegetables and nut and seed oils can be very high in omega-6, which can really jack up systemic inflammation and cause arterial damage too. So again, without doing a super big deep dive, just kind of know trans fats are bad. Saturated and unsaturated fats aren't necessarily good or bad. But fat in general is not to be feared. On my weight loss journey of losing 150 pounds and keeping it off, I have not eaten nor have I searched out fat-free products at all. Often, especially with dairy, when fat is removed from a food, it's immediately replaced with either starch or sugars or a thickening agent that's still a starch. They're just taking out the natural portion of something and filling it with an unnatural, basically garbage. So be wary. That's why all these fat-free products in the 90s, and when we were so scared of fat in the 90s and in the late 80s, and we went into this huge fat-free movement, all it did was increase heart attacks, and our obesity as a nation tripled. So don't fear fat. Fat has a place. Fat can be healthy. It's very satiating. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck. It's where we get our essential fatty acids. It's the only way we can absorb the very important fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamins A, E, D, and K. And that leads to healthy gut health, healthy brain health, healthy heart health. It's great for our hair, skin, and nails. It regulates hormones. When you go on a very reduced fat diet, bad things start happening, and it shows immediately in the hair, skin, and nails. Libido is going to plummet. Different hormones are going to be affected. And we really know now that a very, very low fat diet absolutely is not the way to go. So everybody says, well, how much fat should I eat? Well, every macro and how much you should eat depends on a bunch of different things. And we'll get to that at the end of this video. But basically the minimum, the bare minimum of what you should be getting, and it really should just go up from there, but it would be if you took your height and you converted it into centimeters and you subtracted 100. That's going to let you know roughly like the bare bones minimum amount of fat grams you should be getting a day. So moving on to protein. Protein is 4 calories per gram, as we said. It can come from all sources of meat, and there are some vegetarian sources of protein too. So protein comes from the Greek word protos, which stands for of prime importance. And if there was any one macro that you really want to concern yourself with when it comes to weight loss, it's protein. It is the essential building blocks of our body, and it contains 22 amino acids for a perfect complete protein. Some of these we have right in our body, but there are actually 9 out of those 22 that we have to get from our diet only. That's why when some people go vegan, they become deficient in some of these essential fatty acids, the essential amino acids, and they actually start to get quite sick. And you can actually die if you do not end up having a protein source of these essential amino acids. So when you see that something is a complete protein, that means that it has all 22 amino acids present. That's why when you are putting your collagen and your powdered collagen into your protein smoothies or stirring it in your coffee in the morning, you can't count that towards your protein goals for the day because it's not a complete protein. And again, people say, well, how much protein should I be eating then? And basically, you can eat as much as you want to. Protein's very satiating. Fat is the most satiating, and then protein is just behind it and is almost just as satiating as fat. And you think about it, like how much chicken can you eat before you don't want anymore? Like I know I can't overeat on chicken the way I can pasta. Protein comes with, it sits heavy in the stomach. It activates those stretch receptors in the stomach. And, just almost by default, if you're even listening to your own satiety cues at all, you're not going to overeat on protein because you know when you've had enough, and you don't eat enough that you get stuffed and uncomfortable, and you're not going to bloat off of it the way you are on overeating on carbohydrates or fat. So basically, you want to be eating 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and that equals out to about 0.8 to 1 grams per pound. And again, that's just a rough estimate. We can get into this later if you become a private client of mine in the new year. But if you just want a ballpark figure, it's about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So I weigh 132 pounds, so I should be eating around 132 grams protein a day, or a little bit under than that. So moving on to carbohydrates, those also have 4 calories per gram. And there are 2 different kinds. There are simple carbohydrates and there are complex carbohydrates. And another way that you'll hear that are fast carbs and slow carbs. Fast carbs are fast energy, but they don't stick with you long. And they absolutely cause that spike in blood sugar after we eat them and then the drop. Like we talked yesterday in the insulin video. These are absolutely going to elicit an insulin response. Not all protein does and no fat does. Carbohydrates always do, regardless of whether they're fast or slow. And subsequently, carbohydrates and alcohol are the 2 macronutrients that you can live without. You could never eat another carb and you could never consume alcohol and you're not going to die. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you're going to live your best life or that you'll be happy with because it does stagnate variety in different things, but you absolutely can. But you cannot live without protein and you cannot live without fat. So people would say like, well, Kathy, where do I get my energy? So the body's smart and the body wants to conserve muscle and it wants to conserve energy. But for the people who do eat carnivore or strict keto, if the body needs a fast sugar for any reason, like say the brain needs some or you're under some stress or duress, the body can convert its own protein into sugar via a process called gluconeogenesis. And the body does this for other reasons too. It actually does it during fasting. When you're fasting overnight, this is why we don't die in our sleep when we don't eat for 12 hours. There's always some stored glycogen in our liver, and the body can convert that back into glucose via gluconeogenesis as an energy source. So trust your body, trust that things are, if you are restricting carbohydrates a little bit, you're not going to make yourself really, really sick. I mean, there's always a right way and wrong way to do things, but you don't need to fear lowering those carbs a little bit if you're a healthy person. So how many carbs should we eat a day, Kathy? Well, that's a very tricky question. And again, it depends on many different things. So I'm not going to recommend at all a particular carbohydrate level for you. That's up to you. Ultimately, this is the one macro that you can eat as many or as little as you want to, but it depends on your goals. So if your goal is to be in ketosis and remain into a state of ketosis, where you're primarily switching your body from being a sugar burner to your own stored fat for energy via ketones. Ketones are the result of fat metabolism, and your ketones are what you use for energy. Then you want to keep carbohydrate consumption at 25 grams or below. That is very, very, very restrictive. It doesn't mean it's unhealthy. It doesn't mean it's not possible, and it doesn't mean that it's not sustainable for everyone. Some people eat very well on a ketogenic diet and can maintain that. A lot of people can't. A lot of people do find that too restrictive. So a lot of people choose instead to eat low carb. So it's very important to not confuse low carb and ketogenic. They are not the same. So low carb actually is eating 100 grams of carbohydrates and below. Me personally, I don't really count macros anymore, but when I do put them into, I use a bariatric specific tracker called Baritastic, and it's mainly just to make sure I've eaten enough protein in the day. I don't really care about carbs, and I definitely don't care about fat. But sometimes I'll look just because I'm curious, and I'm hitting between 50 and 75 a day in maintenance. Usually more towards the 50 end of the spectrum, but sometimes it's 75 or 100, or if it's one of my 20% meals, sometimes it's 150 carbs, and that's totally okay. But anyway, so keto's under 25, low carb is under 100, but the standard diet, if you go back to like the food triangle, that's going to tell you to eat 6 to 12 servings of carbohydrates a day. And if you did do that, you're going to be hitting around 300 grams a day. So people's carbohydrate intake needs are different. It's going to depend on many things, and it's going to depend on if you're diabetic or not, and if you're type 1 or type 2 diabetic, it's going to depend on if you're insulin resistant or not, if you have metabolic syndrome or not. So that's not for me to determine. That's actually a conversation you should be having with a registered dietitian or your physician. I can recommend a carbohydrate allowance for weight loss based on your needs. But again, that's going to happen in a private conversation one-on-one. That is, there are no blanket one size fits all macros that I can just say, hey, everybody in this group, eat this for carbs, eat this for protein, and this for fat, and everything's going to be tickety-boo. That just isn't how this works. It needs to be more specified than that. And the reason for that is because our requirements are all different based on age, sex, fitness goals, current weight loss goals, if there are any, and current activity levels. So again, you can see why I cannot blanket an entire set of macros for everybody in this group. We're all different. We all have different goals. We're all at different phases in our weight loss journey. Some of us aren't even trying to lose weight, and we're just here to learn how to be healthier. So if you were looking to get that information today, I'm sorry. If that is information that you do want, then contact me and maybe we can do some private coaching after Christmas. But in a nutshell, that's all you need to know. We have 4 macronutrients: fat, protein, carbs, and alcohol. Fat and protein are going to keep you fullest the longest, and they are the ones that you absolutely do need to survive. Carbohydrates are good for us too. There's many, many healthy sources of carbohydrates, but you can survive life without them. And alcohol you never need. So it's almost like of most important to least, we're going to go from protein to fat to carbs to alcohol. So how you choose to live your life amongst all that information absolutely is up to you. And if need be, up to you and your doctor, or you, your doctor and your registered dietitian, or you, your doctor, your registered dietitian, and your weight loss coach. But hopefully that simplifies things at least a little bit. So when you hear people talking about protein grams and carbohydrate grams, you kind of know what we're talking about now. And hopefully it makes the back of that nutrition label a little more clear as well. And if you have any questions, as always, just shoot me a message down below in the comments to this or in an inbox. It's okay if you still don't understand any of this at this point. This is still really new for a lot of people. And, information on all of this is coming out all the time as well. But that is the basics of Macros 101. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.